In 2025, I had thousands of suicidal thoughts. How did I manage those? Not through drugs, not through antidepressants. Tried those, it's made me worse. I reduced my suicidal thoughts by 90% in a 12-month. 2026, I'm about 10% still, but you know, I had to break it down. I had to really break down what a suicidal thought was. By the time I got to March, April last year, which effectively is 4 months in of that year, I was waking up in the morning, the first thought I had was, and it was a scream in my thoughts, I hate my life. And I would turn and look at my wife, beautiful, angelic, amazing individual, and I think, why do I hate my life? Why do I hate my future? Because a suicidal thought has got nothing to do with your future, it's everything about your past. And it's not about the immediate few months that birthed your suicide thoughts at all. Your suicidal thoughts are an end result of what a past shame, guilt, negative responsibility, disappointment from parenting, disappointment from your children, and that's not their fault. Suicidal thoughts are a build-up of, and this is my interpretation because this is what I managed or was measured or summed up in 25, and how to manage the intensity of suicidal thoughts was that, let me pull in by you, suggest this, you know, suicidal thoughts got nothing to do with the rest of your life, and had nothing to do with my future, had nothing to do with my past 6 months, but everything to do with what had been portions, chapters of my 57 years of life that had the intensity of shame, guilt, responsibility, carried the intensity of hurt, feeling lost in life, feeling left out in life. But again, all these things are almost make-believe, because the fact of the matter is we don't come into this life carrying shame. We don't come into this life carrying hurt, disappointment, guilt. It's an experience that's put on us, or an experience that we feel that others carry for themselves, that we then adopt into our lives due to a responsibility that we inherit from somebody else's disappointment in their responsibilities, their guilt, their shame, and so on and so on. So when I thought deep into my suicidal feelings, they were no more than an emotional paralyzation, feeling paralyzed emotionally, which effectively paused my emotional life. I found myself sleeping all the time, not because I was unwell. I mean, people sleep when they're unwell because sleep is a recovery, is a form of healing. I was sleeping because I was emotionally diseased by my past. I was emotionally exhausted by my past, but a past that actually I adopted in. What I mean by that is we're in charge of what we feel, totally in charge of what we feel. Nobody can hurt me emotionally unless I choose that. Nobody can upset me unless I choose to be upset by that person. And as children, we don't realize that. As teenagers, we don't realize it. Only until you get into your maybe late 30s, 40s, perhaps, well, for me, late 50s. I realized that a suicidal thought was nothing more than a manufacture of disappointment that somebody else felt for themselves, that I adopted into my life. and then found that I surrounded myself by those people that carried those emotions because I was carrying it out of guilt for other people. Sounds a bit techie, I know, but my suicidal thoughts actually had nothing to do with me. They were to do with everybody else. What I mean by that is they weren't responsible for my suicidal thoughts, but I was taking on the accountability of other people not being accountable for themselves by feeling guilty, by feeling responsible, by feeling I had to be generous. Your addiction to generosity, that is just one of the most profound, exhausting emotions, just certainly that we practice as human beings, addicted to being generous, which effectively means we're only ever given the half version of us, because the other half is being responsible for other people, not responsible for themselves. All this adds up then to the disappointment that I felt for me in my life. But why? How could I be disappointed? I chose it. I chose much of it. Someone asked me this week, it's like, Paul, what's your purpose? Do you know, those questions, when I think about those questions, they seem too wide a range to even answer. But I thought into it and thought, you know, last year was a ghost year for me. And the reason why it was a ghost year is because at some point in my life, it had to catch up my lack of purpose. Because what I've realized is that I have forgotten what purpose feels like for myself. I know purpose for other people because I filled my life with that. I filled my life breathing for somebody else instead of breathing for myself. Feeling responsible there to get them to breathe in life. So I kept breathing and breathing for them, which meant that I actually lost what purpose felt like for me. I mean, ask yourself, you know, what is purpose for you? If it's money, forget it. Money is like a cat. It'll go to whoever feeds it. Money has no emotion. Money has no value. In a sense, it has a monetary value, but the emotional value you put to that. And that's usually dictated by the first 10 years of your life. You know, £5 to me is different to £5 to you, or $5, whatever currency you're in. And that's based from the first 10 years of your life. Most people run their lives, run their financial life, their money life, as they do the first 10 years. If their childhood was in poverty, you'll find that they live in poverty for the rest of their life, or some shape of it, for sure. All these emotions built up for me to the end feeling, which was I wanted to take my life. But actually I didn't want to. I just felt the emotion of end. So we could say, you know, I want to end this, I want to end this, I want to end my life, I want to end my life, and then find then your life is just, as I say, paralyzed, emotionally paralyzed. And what I want to do is actually end the past in order to fulfill my future. I wanted to divorce my past. I wanted to commit suicide to my past, not commit suicide to my future, but by fulfilling the true anxiety of what I was feeling, which was, take your life. I actually was removing my future and fulfilling my past. You can't fulfill a past because it's done. So I just kept looking and looking into the detail and detail and detail of it. What I realized was that the thought of suicide had nothing to do with suicide. The thought of suicide was my emotional desperation to finish the past, divorce the past, see it, understand it, move from it. And that was something that I heard from some of my great mentors. See it, understand it, move from it. So really it was like, feel it, understand it, move from it. Feel what it is my emotional self was trying to tell me. Understand it, not react to it, understand it. Which was, my emotional self is telling me, divorce the past. Not divorce my future, not suicide my future, but suicide my past. And that's how I begin to understand it. And understand, this is my version of it. My version of how it is I reduced my suicidal thoughts by 90% in 1 year without the need for medication, drugs. You know, feeling suicidal is a drug. It's an emotional drug. And as most, we could say, illegal drugs actually don't create a future, they just sustain nothing, like a moment in time. You know, a suicidal thought is just that. It's just that it's an end result of what your emotional self wants you to leave go of, and it's saying, let go of the past. You know, that's easier said than done, and it is. You know, and I think in my past, very difficult divorce, I would say, before I met beautiful Deb. You know, my 2 daughters have very little to do with me. You know, you keep measuring yourself. And I said to Deb this morning, I said, you know, I got to draw a line in some things. And one is, I come into this life, I remember as a kid thinking, oh, I'd love to be a dad. I want to be a full-time dad, but I'd love to. There was so much that I wanted to experience, but then now is, that opportunity was very much taken from me. And the law of the lands in those days, when you went through divorce, always favoured, sadly, the woman, and the dad had crumbs of what was left. And yeah, so you know, there was, just bear with me, good to that. I can't do it. My phone's ringing. Yeah. So I think that there you are. It's going to keep ringing until it stops. See, I'm a fire starter. That's my fine tune. That's my fine tune. That's my ringtone. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I didn't get to have that. And I think all those things I've seen at Deb, you know, how disappointing, you know, how empty it sometimes felt, you know, just to be a not even a part-time dad, a sometime dad. And I'm sure there's dads out there can understand that. Yeah. So I guess all those things, you know, were my past, and again, adding into and creating that end result of not wanting to be here. So, looking back, every suicide thought was a scream out from my emotional self to say, let go. Let go. Stop trying to repeat the past to create what is a healthier future, when big chunks of my past actually were very emotionally unhealthy. Yeah. And that's what I work on. So every time I have a suicidal thought, I don't look at the action of it. I look at, okay, where does this one come from today? Where did this suicidal thought come from today? And I don't look at the last 2, 3, 6 months. I go right back and look at, okay, let me think about the layering of that, because each suicidal thought had a different feel to it. It had a master emotion, we could say, which is, I'm done, I want to be out of here. But if you let that pass and go into the fine detail of the layering, and keep going into the layering of what each suicidal thought feels like, where it comes from, you'll see that it comes back from such a long way. And when we look at that, you know, how does that pattern have a play out in your life now? Why? Patterns can be broke, patterns can be changed. That's why it's called a pattern. You know, it's not permanent. And that's the thing, is that each suicidal thought comes from a different pattern, a different negative behavior from the past, or a negative experience from the past. And once I understood that, then I realized that actually none of the suicidal thoughts belonged to me. They just came from the same currency of responsibility I was carrying from somebody else. And that then allowed me to understand it more, know that it didn't own me, know that the thoughts didn't own me, I owned them. And that's the thing. That was the ultimate change that helped me to reduce them was no suicidal thought owns me, I own it. And if I own it, means I'm in charge of it. And in charge of it means that I've created it. If I've created it, where did it come from? Where's the blueprint of that thought? And that's what I did. And that, yeah, that created the change for me. 2026, 90% fewer thoughts. I still get days where I wake up and think, oh, I don't want to have enough. And then I just look at it and think, wait, let me look into that. What does that feel like? Yeah. And then you work through it very easily. Do know, you know, we weren't designed to leave our life early, but we were designed to have opportunities to appreciate the value of our life. And that's what I got out of 2025, which was understanding the value, and it made all the difference. Yeah. Anyhow, crack on. Today I'm on a dress rehearsal, so I'm leaving in a few days for Ireland. So I'm fully loaded up on my bike today, and I'm leaving, yeah, in a couple of days, and then I got a couple of months ahead of me. If you want to follow me, please. If you don't, it's okay. It's okay. But we are going to be deep diving and looking into, you know, the patterns of life and how they work out for people. Happy days.